Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 860. I had the white pieces and started off with e4. My opponent played d6. I was a little confused about the opening at this point. I think I referred to it as a Nimzovich defense, but that's something different. This is actually a Pierce, or that typically leads to a Pierce. We get something different after a couple of moves, but we stay in normal lines here. I go d4, and he goes knight f6. g6 would also be a Pierce. He goes knight f6. I go knight c3 to defend it. You can see that's the main move. In the past, I've played bishop to d3 in this situation to hold on to this pawn and to allow this c-pawn the freedom to move later. The problem with the knight c3 move is that it blocks the c-pawn. But after bishop e3, if black chooses to respond with e5, the bishop is kind of blocked in there. It's not so clear that's a good position for the bishop. So I've switched back to playing knight c3, and this leads to a very standard position. And if he goes with the Pierce defense with g6, I can still play the Austrian attack with f4. I like to play that. But he doesn't play the Pierce. He plays e5 here. And so we've actually switched back, or switched, to a Philidor defense from the Pierce defense. So this is a Philidor, and it's a bit of an unusual Philidor because I have a knight on c3 instead of the knight on f3. If you think about the normal move order for a Philidor, I would play e4, he would play e5, I would play knight f3, he would play d6, and then I would play d4. And so we'd have all of these moves, except my knight would be here, and it's black's move, and he could bring the knight out. So we get the same position, but with my knight on f3. So it's just a little bit different. Anyway, I play knight to f3 now, and I think it's actually a better move order. It's kind of a move order trick that leads to a solid position for black. And you can see that I'm playing the main moves here, bishop c4, very typical in these double king pawn openings. And it just seems that it's hard for white to get a real advantage. The only thing you can say is that black's position is a bit cramped, and so you have to be kind of patient to play this with white, and just take your time, not try to bust through immediately like I did in this game. Take your time, patiently maneuvering, and try to use your space advantage to get your pieces to better squares. So d takes e5 kind of takes us out of the normal lines of this opening. Just to give you a flavor of it, how it might continue. We'll see there's different ways to play here, like rook e1 and a4, although those moves can occur in both orders. So for example, after c6 here, the main move, white plays a4. So those are the ideas for white. A4 to maybe hold back an expansion on the queen side from black, rook e1 supporting the center. Black can stop the pawn with a5, and then h3. So it doesn't seem like kind of the most inspired play from white. You're just kind of trying to set things up in a good fashion. Let's see, you can play knight b6, kicking your queen around, your bishop. Bishop drops back, and then knight fd7. This is when black starts his maneuvers, maybe with the idea of pushing the f-pawn forward. This bishop still needs to be deployed. So it's a position where all the pieces and all the pawns even are still on the board. So it's a closed position still, although there's probably going to be an exchange in the center at some point to get at least a half-open position. And maneuvering seems to be the order of the day, and there's still a slight space advantage to white, but nothing huge. So that seems to be about the best that white can do against good play in the Philidor. Anyway, I went with the immediate exchange here, which isn't so bad, but it does not lead to any advantage for white. So I think pretty much black has no trouble equalizing after this. Let's see, I went queen e2 to help support this pawn and maybe bring a rook to the d file. You can see this actually has been played before, but it's not very popular. Let's see, I went a4, and then went queen c7, and now I went bishop e3. Rook d1, I think I mentioned that before. That's maybe an idea here, way to keep some life in the position, or h3. I guess that's always a useful move here. Stop the knight from coming here and then develop the bishop. Anyway, I went bishop e3 immediately, and we're out of the opening book. Let's see, he went b6, on knight d2. I was thinking of pushing my f-pawn forward and trying to get something going over here. But the chess engine does not approve of this f4 move. It's not like it's losing, but it thinks actually that black has the better position after I play f4. You know, one of the problems is that this e-pawn is weak. And the other problem is that, you know, these bishops are starting to look pretty good as I open up lines on the king side. So you can see in this game how his bishops got active. So f4 is just a little bit too, you know, it's trying too hard. Although it's probably a reasonable try in a blitz game. It's just asking for too much in this position that you can't really get away with this. There's, you know, black is just too solid here. So yeah, the chess engine has a number of suggestions like moving the rooks or playing h3, that kind of thing. Anyway, I went with f4. Still should be playable. You know, it's just that the chess engine now prefers black after this, probably because black is going to win the bishop pair. And now I hadn't thought about this move f5. So this is a really interesting point here. And I liked it because it you know, puts pressure on this knight. It shuts down that bishop. But I was worried about one point here. I noticed that after the exchange, my queen and my king are on a diagonal here. All he has to do is get his bishop here with tempo, or even yeah, move this knight with tempo. Then he can put the bishop here and has a game-winning skewer there. So before playing this line, you have to be, you know, pretty sure that there's no really good tempo move with this knight here. But it just turns out there isn't. So for example, if the knight comes to either one of these squares, I can take back with a knight. Say he takes here, I can take with this knight. If he went to the other square, I could take with the other knight. And what that knight does is it defends the c5 square, so he can't play c5. Okay, so those are out. If he jumps into either of these two squares, my queen can take the knight and get off that diagonal, so there's no longer a pin there. So that means the knight can only go backwards, and kind of the most interesting backwards move is knight to e6, and now I have to move my queen to get it off this diagonal. So that's all he gains, is that one tempo, and maybe he can use it to put his knight on f4. Could be an interesting position, but it doesn't lead to any huge advantage to black. So that in this position I really could have played f5, and I should have. I just didn't calculate that out. I saw that my queen and king were on a line there, and I didn't take the time to check all the possible knight moves to see if there was any decent discovery there. I just cleared my king off the diagonal. But now black is noticeably better here. So maybe winning, maybe not, but it's significantly better for black. He takes, and I take with the rook. Taking with the queen is not helping all that much because his best move here is bishop d6, and this kind of works in either case. It's hitting the rook, and it's also threatening the h-pawn. Maybe taking with the queen was a little better because the queen's a more flexible piece to have out here. If I move the rook to defend this pawn, you know, for the moment I'm hanging on to my material, but my pieces are just kind of awkwardly placed. And I'm not yet. I mean, a rook out here is sometimes useful if I get some pressure on h7, for example. But it's I'm not yet in a position to really get something on this diagonal. I have to push the pawn out of the way, and then he has time to play a move like h6 to stop that idea anyway. So yeah, it's just tough for me to do anything with this rook, and it's kind of oddly placed there, and black can plan to kick it around in the future. So that's a good position for black. Bishop g5, this is a good move here, but there is one way out that I have. So let's see, I could have taken with the rook here. You know, I was actually calculating a similar line. I was calculating bishop takes, you know, bishop takes with check, and then if he takes with the rook, which actually is not the best move, but then I could take back, hitting his queen, so both queens are hanging. And if he goes for the queen trade, then I can take his queen. He can take my knight. And let's see, maybe I can grab another pawn. But the material here is that he's got 3 pieces and 1 rook. I have 2 rooks and 1 piece. That means he's got 2 pieces for a rook. So actually, black is a little bit better in this position. I didn't really want to go for that. Also, it turns out that after bishop takes f7 check, if he just either moves his king to the side or takes with the queen, this is even stronger. I mean, I still have a problem that my queen is getting killed here. So if he takes back, you know, black is, if I take back, black will take my queen. So this really, bishop takes f7 doesn't work, but the move rook takes f7 does work. So if I had noticed this is actually the best move, and it leads to a position which is equal according to the chess engine. It recommends taking here, and I would take, and I take with check, and then he can block with the bishop. He doesn't want to block with the rook and give up the exchange there, but he can block with the bishop, and I can save my knight. And for the moment, I'm a pawn up, but my pieces are a bit strangely placed once again. Well, he's got to save his bishop, but so black has the bishop pair and better coordination of his pieces, and overall, the chess engine thinks those advantages compensate for the fact that he's a little down in material right now. So an even game after that could ensue. So that would be the right way to play, both from a practical point of view and also from the chess engine point of view. Let's see. Rook takes f7. If instead of taking the queen, he could try taking the rook. But then this is actually better for me. So this is not as good for him because I can take that rook with check and then grab the bishop. Let's see, this is a rook in 2 pieces. He has a rook in 2 pieces. I have the extra pawn. It's just my pieces are a little better coordinated in this situation. So this is actually good for white. So anyway, that was my chance here after bishop g5. I had thought to take with the rook there and calculated that out. Instead, I didn't see that. I calculated the line with bishop takes. I saw that that didn't work, and so I decided to give up the exchange here and just fight on the exchange down. So he took, I took, and he went bishop e6. So just in general, I have to say that black's play was really good. This bishop g5 move was the only real mistake so far. Played an excellent opening and took advantage of my mistakes here, and he just didn't find quite the best move at that point. But he still got a big edge here, and should go on to win. The problem is that he was really taking a lot of time thinking about his moves to find those good moves, and you really have to allow for the clock in these games. So anyway, I played b4, kicking his knight. He took my bishop. I mean, he's got the right strategy. He wants to trade off pieces and simplify. So I take the bishop back, and he dropped his knight back, hitting my rook, so that comes with tempo. Drop back to defend the back rank. He brings one of his rooks to the center there. Played e5, and he did miss a trick here. I thought, hang on a second, I played e5. Yeah, I want to bring my pieces over. He did miss a trick here. He played b5, and he could have played rook to d4, and I think I mentioned this during the video, during the live commentary. You know, wherever I move my knight to, he can at least pick up this b pawn. If I play knight d6, which is kind of the most tempting move here, he also has the idea of f6 undermining my knight. But anyway, this gains him some more material, and that's the best move there. b5 is still a good move in the sense that it keeps a winning edge for white, but it's not as strong. Let's see, he takes, I take. Knight d6. That's because I get my knight to this good perch. I guess he could still think about playing f6 here, but anyway, he wanted to first defend this pawn. I guess that's more important. And then I played knight d5, hitting his queen. Yeah, so he hasn't had time to play f6 yet. And he played queen d7. Queen d7 turns out is the best move there. I was calculating this line with queen c2. It turns out this is playable as well. I was thinking, I would lure the queen away, play this check, and then take advantage of the f-pawn here, that it's under defended. But I can't really take it. Let's see, if I take with the knight, and he takes back, and I take the rook, then he's got his rook coming down here, and I have a problem on the back rank. Let's see, I could try doing it the other way. I could take with the rook, and then he could check with his queen, and I could defend with my queen, so maybe this holds together. But he has this nice move, queen e2, and I'm actually stuck for a move here. If I trade rooks, his rook comes to this file, and he's threatening to bring the rook down here supported by the queen and just win my queen for a rook. There's really no way out of this. I can't bring my rook back. He can just take it. All these squares are covered by the queen. I guess I could drop it back to f3. So maybe that's a possible move here. But anyway, I'm just in big trouble in this position because of my weak back rank. You know, he's got ideas of bringing either rook down to help take advantage of my position here, or just maybe bringing the knight in. I think knight to f4 is also a pretty dangerous move as well. So anyway, big trouble for me. So it's a good thing he didn't really test this out. After queen c2, the chess engine says I can play this check, drive his king to h8, and then I need to play h3. And thinks that white's, black is still a little better in this position, but in this position he went queen d7, which is actually the best move. It keeps the biggest edge for black. And I went queen g3 here, setting up this fork, and he lost on time at this point. He only had a few seconds left on his clock. If he had just moved his king to h8, that actually turns out to be a fine answer to this threat. And the chess engine still rates black as winning. It gives it an advantage of 2 to 3 points, somewhere in that range. So a good position for black. So the key here is you really just have to watch the clock and allocate your time appropriately. I mean, it's good to think about moves and try and play the best move, but at the same time you have to allow enough time on your clock to allow for the possibility of things becoming complicated later. I mean, we're only on move 25 here, and that's really early middle game, so you should only be, maybe half your time gone on your clock or something like that. No more than half. And he had used it all up. So anyway, that's how it ended. Interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you again soon. Bye.